Hello everyone, I am Weeb Shortz, and today I am telling you why you might be using your stock swap wrong. In this video, I will also be explaining a few other ways to improve your ability to make your opponent sad, because if your opponent is sad, it means you're probably winning. Now, for why I'm making this video in the first place. I see a lot of low-level players and even some high-level players using this effect, which should be easy to use, incorrectly. But first, we need to get into what is a stock swap. So a stock swap is the community-given term for the following effect. You place all of your opponent's stock into their waiting room, and then your opponent puts the same number of cards from the top of their deck into their stock. A couple alternate names for this is a stock wash, a stock dump, flip, troll, and some places even call it a stock bomb, but that overlaps with another community term for a different card entirely, so I would recommend against using stock bomb. Now here we have a nice chart given to us by Kevin, also known as Kilua. He's known for posting stats on Japanese meta stuff, as well as posting a bunch of tournament winning lists to Encore decks. He's given us this chart that is most, if not all, of the stock swaps that are in the game as of the recording of this video. In the first row here, we have cards that need to climax combo in order to resolve this effect. Second row is level 3 characters that have it. Third row is level 2s and level 0 characters that have this effect. And the last row is all events that do the same effect. Now this chart's really good for if you want to know what sets have the stock swap in order to know which sets you should be playing around a stock swap for. And it's also good if you just want to play a set with a stock swap, and you can refer to this chart and see which one you want to play. Moving on, why is a stock swap good? So in Weiss, you have this general way of play, which is compressing your deck. And that means you are making your deck as few non-climaxes and as many climaxes on your opponent's turn as possible. That way you cancel more often, and therefore you're winning more often because you're not dying. Now, stock swap is a decompression tool. It has the ability to single-handedly rip away that compression, and therefore rip away your chances at winning. It challenges what's normally considered good play. So anytime you're playing against a deck that has stock swap, you need to play slightly differently in order to make sure you are staying compressed. I'm not saying don't compress because stock swap exists. I'm saying you still need to compress, but you need to compress in a way that you won't get blown out by a stock swap. There's also the argument that a stock swap is good because of the mind games. Some say that the best stock swap you have is a stock swap that you never have to play, because it'll force your opponent into overthinking ways to play around it, and they'll end up putting themselves into a bad position without even knowing it. That's not a real way as to why, or it's not a real reason why a stock swap is good, but I felt it was worth noting as it's common enough that people overthink the way to play around it. Now, getting into this, let's say you have a stock swap, and you are presented with these two scenarios in which you can play your stock swap against your opponent A and opponent B. So opponent A has 11 clean stock, a 20 card deck, and six climaxes in those 20 cards. So you should know all of this information yourself. You should be keeping track of your opponent's stock. You should be keeping track of how many climaxes they refresh with. If you are not keeping track of those things, you will never intentionally and effectively use a stock swap. So, on this, player B here has 5 clean stock and a 5-card deck. In that 5-card deck, 3 of them are climaxes. Now, you can take this moment to pause and decide which of these players gets actively blown out by stock swap. Now, I will be explaining a little bit of math behind stock swap here. So we've got some boring math here. Let's say you have a bag of 20 marbles. 5 of those marbles are red, 15 are blue. You reach your hand into that bag and blindly remove 8 all at once. On average, I'm not saying specifically this first one that you are going to remove is going to be this. I'm saying after a very large sample size, you will find that on average, you will remove 2 red marbles from those 20 marbles alongside the rest of the blue ones. This is going to leave that bag of marbles with 3 red and the remaining 12 total marbles. Now, if you like stat or you're just in a stat class right now, you might notice that the original ratio of 5 red and 20 total marbles is the same ratio as the 3 red to the 12 total marbles, 1 and 4. So if you have that bag of 20 marbles with 5 red in it, you pull 1 random marble out, you have a 1 in 4 chance of that marble being red. If you have that bag of 12 marbles with 3 red in it, you pull a marble out, there's a 1 in 4 chance of that marble being a red marble. So with that, we can go back to our scenarios here. So let's say you play a stock swap against player A. You have blindly put 11 cards from the top of their deck into their stock. With that, you do not know what you have pulled out of their deck. So because of that, the ratio is going to end up staying the same, because while yes, you might be likely to hit climaxes, alongside that, on the average, you are still going to be putting non-climaxes in there at a rate at which will not change their deck state. So even though you stock swapped for 11 cards, which is a lot of cards to stock swap, the odds that your opponent cancels your attacks during your attack phase that turn is not going to change. However, if we move over to player B here, which is the correct answer for what needs to be, which one of these is more blown out by stock swap, you are stock swapping significantly less cards, but you are stock swapping their entire deck away. Their deck being 3 climaxes and 5 total cards means that whatever their next deck is going to have a maximum of 5 climaxes, as well as you're giving them you're making them take a refresh penalty, which is basically an uncancelable burn 1. So now they are no longer in that hyper compressed 3 climaxes, 5 cards. They're in a maximum of 5 cards with however many they're going to refresh with total. Almost always that's going to be worse than the... Actually, yes, always. That will always be worse than the 3 and 5 that they had beforehand. So because of this, you stock swap player B. They are now much less likely, to cancel your attack phase there. And that they're then having to scramble to get their deck compressed again, which, as I have presented the scenarios here, it's probably too late for that, and they're going to end up losing. So, generally speaking, you only want to be stock swapping your opponent when it's going to change their compression rate. So it's almost always good to use it whenever they have the same number of stock and the same number of cards in deck. Now, if you stock swap them and they've got like 1 or 2 cards left in deck, you can probably still swing into that and it'd be a good stock swap, because your second and third attack will end up swinging into that newly decompressed deck state that you have created. But again, with player A here, you stock swap way more cards, but on average, you're not doing anything. You're not helping yourself. You're not hurting yourself. So you're just wasting the effect in that scenario. Now, moving on to this, I'm going to have a little footnote here about Fumios. Fumio is the community given term for the following effect. When this card is placed from hand to stage, you may pay the cost. If you do, your opponent chooses 2 climaxes from their waiting room and shuffles all the rest of their waiting room back into their deck. This chart here, also made by Kilua, is showing all of the Fumios in the game as of the recording of this video. The top row there, all Fumio for 2, or they all refresh your opponent with 2 less climaxes than they would be. And then the bottom row all does the same thing, but it only refreshes them with 1 less rather than 2. So, with these can very easily make a bad stock swap good. If we go back to that player A, where you stock swapped 11 cards, if you were then to play a Fumio, you are now shuffling that clean stock back into their deck, as well as whatever clean damage was in their waiting room. So you turn that bad stock swap into a good stock swap, because while the stock swap itself didn't do anything on its own, on average, your opponent's waiting room now has more clean damage in their waiting room to shuffle back with the Fumio, and therefore they're in a new decompressed deck state, and will end up taking much more damage on average in that than if you just stock swapped. So with this, you can also kind of delay a Fumio, and you can make an otherwise bad stock swap good. And I have this example of the Noble Phantasm Unleashed here, as it is a stock swap that comes that is active at level 1. So let's say you and your opponent have a long level 0 and level 1 game. You both end up making a lot of clean stock, and the game is still progressing after that. If you stock swap all that clean stock early on, even though it's not going to end up doing anything that turn, there's still a lot of game to play out. So you can end up making them refresh poorly within the next turn cycle or two. Because eventually if you do it early enough, they're eventually going to deck out and they're going to have to refresh. And if they didn't get climaxes back into their deck, they're risking refreshing not compressed, which they do not want, because after that, then they're in a decompressed deck state. You're in your finisher turns. They're not compressed. You're more likely to win because they're less likely to take damage. So I hope this video found all of you guys well. I hope you will leave comments asking questions. I'm sure I missed some information in here. Please like the video, subscribe. I'll be trying to make more videos soon, or even if not soon, thinking more ideas on videos to make. Maybe start streaming games. I don't know. But yeah, comment with any questions. Be sure to share the video around, and let's make it to where people stop using this effect so incorrectly. Thank you all. Bye.